Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So I think we're going to have you line up in the hall and bring you in.
Great. I know. It's exciting. I know. I was like, yeah.
Real. So everybody's gonna sit for 6 minutes awkwardly in the dark and stare at golf course.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna just put this.
You just don't know. You think you're objective, but we're too close to it. So it's been really.
Get you guys in here. You don't have to actually have to be in the green room. I just trust me when I say you don't want to awkwardly sit at the table in the dark, staring at the audience while they stare above your head. We learned that. We didn't think of that. We learned.
Oh, that poor group.
I was going to try to hold it while standing, but I can't because it's taped. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Filmmaker panel. I don't know if you can hear them. They're very rowdy over there. So we're going to start with some of the clips from the movies that are going to be playing, and then we'll get into talking to them. If you have any questions while we're doing the Q&A, raise your hands, and we'll be happy to answer whatever it is that you have questions about.
Solidarity for Will.
I think that's it. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
Missionary.
Missionary? Do yourself a favor, look up Butter Turner, but not on the clock. All right, phone's away.
Yes, yes,
Cool.
yes.
It is not a competition.
Of course it is. Everything in life is a competition.
People do what makes them feel good and feel included.
Love defies rational thinking.
I have been trying so hard to get you to be close to me.
Tide's coming in.
Donn was serving these very elaborate
layered, teasingly elusive, flavored rum cocktails, his rum rhapsodies, as he called them, lavishly presented in hacked open coconuts or scooped out pineapples or with delicate little ice shells lining the inside of the glass. And they tasted like nothing anybody had had before. And it became a sensation.
Having spent some time in Jamaica, and the smell of Jamaica rum is always in my nostrils, I developed rum drinks. And no one had ever tasted rum drinks.
En esa marcha, hoy nosotros nos hicimos presente como familia. Yo estaba acompañado de mis 2 hijos. Carabineros se fue en mi contra, ¿cierto? Me detuvieron.
Mira cómo le patea la cabeza el oficial. No anda con nombre tampoco. Le patearon la cabeza al detenido en el suelo. Inconsciente, ¿va? ¿No? Le están pegando al peña adentro, grita.
Is good.
So, I guess the place to start is just by introducing yourselves and saying what movie you're here with, and maybe how you came to make the movie that you made.
I'm Will Parrinello. Thanks for having me here and showing my film. Water for Life is a film that I began 12 years ago when I found the story of an environmental activist in El Salvador who had succeeded in stopping mining from happening in his country. And his anti-mining movement gained an incredible deal of traction very early, like 1 year in. And given that he's a subsistence farmer, he's not a political person in any way, shape, or form, but it gained a lot of traction because it happened at the time of a presidential election. And polls showed that 85% of the people were against mining. Mining got banned by the sitting president because he saw that the candidate for his party was probably going to lose because they're conservative, pro-mining political party. And mining got banned, and then within a year, 3 of my hero's associates were assassinated. And I decided this is a story that has to be told. And eventually I added 2 other stories to the mix to show these patterns of exploitation and impunity that are happening across Latin America, one in Chile and one in Honduras.
Hi, I'm Max Well.
We don't trust them to have their own microphones.
Yeah. Is it okay if I pick this up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, feel free to do it.
Oh, okay, thank you. That'll just be a little easier since we're sharing. Maxwell, and this is Alex Lamb. We made a film called The Donn of Tiki. It's about the life of Don Beach, also known as Don the Beachcomber, who started what would become the world's first tiki bar back in Hollywood in the 1930s. And this is a project that we sort of fell into. We were looking at doing a short film about some of the old tiki bars in LA, and we discovered Don Beach, and he had this fascinating life story, and we thought that we owed it to him to make a full feature-length version of this about his life.
Ian?
Alex, any extra?
Yeah, that's all true.
There we go. We'll get it to my height. Hi, I'm Ian Ebright. I wrote and directed The Way We Speak. My favorite genre is documentaries, so I was like marinating by rewatching over and over a couple favorites of mine, Best of Enemies about Gore Vidal versus William F. Buckley, which I think is like a really wise political documentary, one of my favorites, and also Life Itself about Roger Ebert, the film critic, and his rivalry with Siskel and his health and marriage. And I thought I would try to like squeeze the themes out of that and do something that I would want to watch.
Awesome.
We'll also take this out. Hi, I am Bonnie Gross.
I'm Nancy Boyd.
I'm the writer and executive producer of Lady Parts.
And I'm the director of Lady Parts.
And we are sharing this mic. But Lady Parts is actually based off my own personal true story. It's about a woman named Paige who has to quit her dream job, move back home with her parents, and undergo vaginal surgery for a vulvar vestibulectomy. And that is actually what happened to me in real life. And we are really, really excited to share the story.
Yeah, Bonnie and I ended up getting connected through a mutual friend and a coworker for Bonnie. And Bonnie was writing the story, and Megan said, "Oh, wow, you need to talk to my friend Nancy, who is a director and also has vaginal pain." So that's how we got together, through pain.
I like the idea of like being introduced to someone like through vaginal pain. Like that's how you were identified to them.
Yes, it connects us all.
So I actually, that's a great place to start because all the movies have very specific tones, and I think that's kind of what makes them all so fascinating. Like turning a medical emergency or a medical situation into a comedy. How do you get the perspective to make a thing that I'm sure was both emotionally and physically painful to go through? How do you get the perspective to make that into something that's funny for other people?
Yeah. Personally, my favorite genre is comedy. I'm really, really drawn to comedy. And I think writing it, I wanted to feel like true life, which is that you have moments that are really sad, moments that are really funny. And, you can't have comedy without tragedy, tragedy without comedy. And I know for myself, like going through it, like laughter was the best medicine. And there was times where me and my parents, we'd be doing something crazy on the sitz bath and we'd just be like cracking up at one point and crying. And it was weird, but that's life. And I think that's what people can relate to, no matter if they're getting vaginal pain or whatever it is in life, they can relate to that.
Yeah, I think that if I was making this movie, there's no way that it wouldn't have been a comedy. That's definitely like my native tongue. I think that where we found a lot of our comedy also, it comes from the message and meaning of our film, is that we want to take these private matters and make them public. That doesn't mean it's not uncomfortable. And a lot of uncomfortable moments creates laughter for us. And so a lot of our comedy comes from the fact that she does not want this to be public at all, and it gets blown out of proportion, and her parents are involved, and you can't help but laugh at how ridiculous it is.
I like that it's impossible to talk about the movie without having double meanings for everything. You're like, it's painful, and I was like, oh yeah, no, it's physically painful and it's painful. Yeah. So Ian, your movie could have it could be easy for that movie to become too much because of all of the dramatic things that are in it, but it doesn't. It rides that line, and everything stays grounded and true. How do you write something where people are going to speak in monologues, but they still have to be... that's who the characters are.
No, you're good. It cracks me up. But I'm not insulted.
That's good. I'll insult later.
Yeah, we'll get there. You're good.
Yeah. How do you balance that? How do you make sure that each part of the script has enough truth to it that it doesn't come across as too much, that like neither side like wins, and there is the debate there?
That I'm glad that you said that. That's a big compliment. I guess.
I told you I would insult you later.
Yeah, we'll get. I mean, the dopey answer is like practice. It was my 12th screenplay, so if I tried to do what you just said in my first 5, those failed miserably, and they were heavy-handed on the nose. So you get better as you practice anything, and then I don't know. I'm kind of like driven by what I don't like, and I have a very like. I'm 45, so like I've seen a lot by now, as we all have. It's like it's hard to surprise. So you quickly go, oh, it could be this or that, and then the exciting thing is like the tightrope. Oh, I don't know. Let's kind of like swim in those waters, And what's fun for me is almost like a smokescreen or misdirection, which I had fun doing in the script of like teeing people up to think, oh, I got it. You're gonna be pro this or anti that, and at least we tried to almost have that be a fake out thing. Right. So it was practice. And then it was watching a lot of stuff that turns my stomach, and being like, I don't want to be associated with this or that. And
you have to say more about that.
I've never seen the God's Not Dead films. Okay. I read a description on Wikipedia after I had made it, and I was uncomfortable with how similar they sounded because I've never seen them. I don't like movies at all. This will be a little soapboxy, but that I think audiences are really savvy. So you smell the agenda a mile away.
Right.
And I don't know, we all get bored and we're busy and there's too much to watch. There's too much streaming options. So it's if I'm my first audience and I would like to make people feel like their time is valuable, it's fun to flirt with those ideas of, playing to a team or something. But the fun for me was trying to frustrate it. And then the honest, cap is collaborating with crazy smart actors.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is just the most fun thing, who are don't have egos. And they get what I'm trying to do, but they'll be on the set. It could be better. And I find that really fun. So being surrounded by people, Kaylee said last night at our screening, safe is it's a popular word now, but it's a good word. And it was zero to family feeling of I'm around people, we have similar taste, similar shorthand, we're referencing similar films. And then it's oh, cool, this is only gonna get better as they push back on me and be like, dude, that little piece feels off.
I don't know what it says about me, but as I was watching, the Christian writer, you like her personally more, but I obviously because I'm here with all of you artsy people, I disagreed with her more.
Sure.
But the person that I agreed with, politically or theoretically, I was turned off from emotionally. I was like, this guy's a dick. I'm glad bad things happen to him.
That's wonderful to hear. I love that. I mean, my favorite movies are those kind of things where I'm I feel I like dark comedy, I love Sacha Baron Cohen historically, especially his show. I like awkward situations, and especially films where it kind of pokes me in a place I didn't want to. So what you're describing is a compliment, and you'd say on behalf of our team, we had lots and lots of conversations about, we know we're going into a tightrope, and how do we not be, I don't know, God's Not Dead, or just anything that's okay, we got it. You know what I mean?
Wait,
and then the next hour
is Kevin Sorbo. That's a good.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Hercules is great. So to sort of keep that conversation, Max and Alex, the thing about Donn of Tiki that I think we talked a little bit about last night was how you've had to, and I'll use a drinking pun. You have to distill the story from being something that's super.
Well
they
done.
got it. They got it. Some of it. It could be really, really complicated, but you managed to find a way to simplify and find humor in something that could have been a lot more complicated than that. What was your process like for finding that through line that, okay, he's kind of a ridiculous but awesome person. How do we hang the story around him without really getting bogged down in some of the other stuff?
I think there were a lot of conversations in the editing room, and a lot of conversation. We had an outline of Donn's sort of the key moments in Donn's life, and knew what that through line was. But then when we were editing, it was very important to kind of, in the beginning of the movie, explain that Donn is basically a liar, and tells these fantastical stories about his life. I think you
used the word entertainer.
Yeah, he's an entertainer. But he, it sort of gives us a little bit of forgiveness, because as we're telling some of these stories, the audience can kind of decide what part of that story is true and what part of it is, Donn's exaggeration.
Yeah, and I will say, even before we really narrowed it down on Donn's life, just in scope, there were a couple of other documentary films that had covered Tiki as a subculture, and some are not, they're good films, but it's such a broad topic. We felt like we needed to just pick one thing and really dig into that. And so, yeah, it took a little bit of time, but we decided, okay, the movie's about Donn's life. Everything else needs to kind of revolve around that.
And Well, you kind of have the same issues, or not issues, but you have the same things that you're dealing with with the three stories and the things that happen. You could easily show the audience too much. Like you could make it, the things that happen are so dramatic and they're so terrible. If you didn't have as soft of a touch as you did, it could have gone too far. How do you know when you might be pushing the audience more than is?
I mean, lots of time in the edit room and being really honest and screening for trusted peers and, not only peers, but, like a more general audience, smart friends and family members, but bringing people in off the street. I mean, so just kind of constantly gauging ourselves. And, I work with a pretty close-knit team. So my writer, Sarah Cass, my editor, Majo Calderon, and I together in the edit room, keeping each other honest and constantly pushing back and forth and finding that balance. But, hours, weeks, months in the edit room, I guess, is what I would say. But, for us, the benchmark was what's the most natural through line where we get to see these people as human beings? Because as activists, right, they're all out there protecting the environment, and they all see themselves as defending their people and their water and their land. But that becomes this sort of iconic thing, like a person with a bullhorn gets old, it's shrill. And so we tried to show them as human beings, and that the key to that was showing their family, because they tend
the daughter in particular.
Right, the daughter of the gentleman in Chile, and also the wife, but also, the wife of Francisco in El Salvador, and in Honduras, Berta's daughters, right? So it's that human side that was really, really important, and that came through those family members, because our figures almost were too iconic, right?
The thing that I think is kind of like separates you from some of the other climate movies is that rather than it be about this like big idea of what you can do to kind of like save the world, it's really just about these people want access to land that they've been living on and water that will keep them alive. And it's so simple. Like you strip away everything else, and it's all in there, but everything else goes away, and it's that like such a human necessary thing. And I think that's why it has the emotional resonance that it does.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. That's a beautiful compliment. I mean, I feel like all three of our characters, all three of our protagonists, although I say they're activists, and we didn't want them to be the shrill bullhorn-wielding activist that has this negative connotation, they all would tell you that they're not activists,
right? That
they're not environmentalists, that they're just doing what you and I would do if someone came and took our land and our water and tried to crush our lives, our culture, and our lives. And I say, I don't think so. I think I would flee. I mean, I think you are heroic, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, quite frankly. And so, I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
I think that's what I was asking. Is that, that sort of like human element? I think that's the thing where sometimes we get lost. Is it's just it feels too big.
Yeah.
And the movie really like grounds this struggle in something that's like tangible and touchable.
As I say, thank you. That's a beautiful compliment. And the advantage of not having enough money and spending 12 years making a film is that you get to really know people, and you grow to build a relationship of trust, and so that you get to capture those moments that would be impossible if you went on one trip, right, and filmed once only. So it's a luxury.
How much did you go? How long were you down there, or how many times did you go down there?
So we began filming El Salvador in 2010, and we went 5 times. We began filming in Honduras in 2015, and we went 5 times. In Chile, we began in 2018, and we went 5 times. In Chile, however, the story was carrying over COVID, so we had a Mapuche cinematographer, filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, who was there and filming when we weren't able to be there. So we were very lucky, and we collaborated with filmmakers or journalists in each country to be our fellow producers, our field producers, and they helped us make sure that not only we were telling the story that was honest and that was real from the perspective of a local as opposed to an outsider, but also that we could kind of carry on and have continuity that way.
That's awesome. I wanted to, I don't know if this is too inside baseball and you don't want to share, but is there any update on Berta's daughter?
So Berta Cáceres is an activist from Honduras, and she was assassinated in 2016. And her 3 daughters have carried on. 2 of them are running COPIN, which is an indigenous environmental human rights organization that Berta co-founded with her ex-husband. So 2 of them are running that organization, and they're doing an amazing job. I'm going to see them at a film festival in Mexico next month.
Awesome.
And her other daughter, Olivia, went from being the first congresswoman from their state, from their district, and who has indigenous blood, and now with the new president of Honduras, it's a woman, President Castro, appointed her as the ambassador to Cuba. So we're going to screen in Cuba next week, and she's going to be there for that film festival, which is going to be really exciting, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We could talk about Latin American politics all day, but we also have to talk about tiki culture and vaginal issues as well. That's what we bring to you at the Florida. As possible. One of the things that I always come back to, because I'm a teacher, is I already spoke a little bit about it. There's this balancing act of too much versus too little versus how do you know if you're balancing the characters, all of those things. I'm curious, while you were making the movie, what was the toughest thing to crack? It doesn't necessarily have to be balanced, but what was the thing about making this movie that you struggled with the most, that every day when you would wake up and start to edit or start to write, you were like, how do I address this thing? Will, do you want to go first?
I mean, it's sort of back to your question from a minute ago, right? It's finding that right balance and not having too much information. And, because you're steeped in the story, you feel like the audience needs to know everything. So it was a constantly peeling back. And it was a constant, the mantra was, how little can we share with the audience, right? And we went from a film that when we showed a rough cut a year ago, had way too much information. The audience just said, whoa, whoa.
How long was that cut?
It was 2 hours, but it was really a question of then just saying, how can we have our characters tell absolutely as much of their stories as possible? The audience doesn't necessarily care about the details, so we have one short historic piece in each story, each of our 3 stories, that talks about some kind of repressive, despotic government activity that's repressing the people, that is part of the history that allows the land and the water to be taken from the people illegally, but only that much information. And we went back and we mined the raw footage and literally poured over transcripts to make sure that our characters told, 85% of the story or more. So
Will also made a pun, but you guys did. He said mind, and the movie's about minding. That's where we're at today. It's been a lot of that.
Thanks for noting that.
Yeah, I did. I appreciate it. So with the Donn of Tiki, what was the thing that was the toughest for you guys? One of the things I'm really interested in is with the amount of animation that you had to probably lock a lot sooner than a lot of documentaries might. Is that the case, or am I off base in thinking that?
You would think so. What we ended up doing was kind of a combination. Like we had sort of a rough lock so that we could get the animation started, and then we were still kind of able to move some things around if we had to, but those animation sequences were locked. So
what was the toughest thing to tackle while you were making the movie?
I've got one. Well, it's okay. So one of the things that we toyed with a lot and struggled with a little bit in the beginning is we make a point to establish Donn, our main character, as an unreliable narrator, right? And so with a documentary, which is generally fact-based, right, when you say from the very beginning, we're telling this story that maybe is not entirely true, we were just sort of walking a line and trying to say, okay, here's what we know, here's what we think we know, and here's Donn's version of things. And trying to get that straight so that the audience would understand, like, okay, this is, we're sort of in story world here, or we're in fact world, and kind of going back and forth between those two things. That was a dance, throughout the process. And hopefully it worked.
I mean, the thing that's cool about it is you blend the fact and fiction pretty seamlessly. Like, there is a zombie drink, but how the zombie was invented is up in the air. Like, I don't know that I believe either of the stories that are, like, fact in the movie.
Neither do we.
Right. There's way too much science involved for it to just been a thing that someone made by accident once.
Yeah. Another thing that I think was a struggle early on, even before when we were prepping for interviews and stuff, is it was very important that we knew we didn't want to lionize or demonize Donn. We wanted to try to be as honest as we could and not steer away from any of his flaws, which was a little bit tricky because we were interviewing a lot of Tiki people who he's like their hero. But I think we did a pretty good job of staying honest and trying to stay pretty even-keeled on the whole thing.
Print the legend, right? Isn't that what they say?
Yeah.
Ian, what about you? What was your...
The hardest thing?
Yeah.
Screenplay was really hard. I feel like that was about 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and 40 to 60 drafts. Oof. Yeah. Like, all my other stuff has been more genre than I expected, but it's really nice because you can hide in your plot. And then people are just like, didn't like it or did, but what they don't know is, like, it saves you when you're writing. And this, I felt like I was kind of following what I had learned from my storytelling mentor, but, like, if the characters and motivations weren't working, I didn't have a spaceship appearing in Act 3 to hide behind. So the screenplay was...
But it would have been so good if you did.
Check this out. I ran this by my wife, and she almost, like, her blood ran cold. I'm like, what if... at the end, because we're talking about futurism, Sarah, his opponent, just freezes and short circuits, and the twist is that they're sort of like going like this is the first like living AI model, and they didn't know, and I was like, I don't hate it. My wife was like, don't make that.
That's the A24 version of the movie.
Yeah. But then I've seen enough cartoons where like you'd have to do the sparks. I would ruin the tone of the whole thing. But money was a big thing too. Like we didn't have enough, So we're SAG, ultra low budget. It goes incredibly fast, and we were an 18-day shoot, which just wasn't enough. And I have very high expectations, so like I thought I was being smart. And I helped myself a bit by writing reoccurring locations in a small cast.
That's what I was just about to ask. So, like, the debate is locked down in one place.
That got me a lot of mileage. And, like, in that setting, we get, like, 5 sub-settings, green room and backstage and stuff. So I'm like, hey, Ian, you're learning. But really, we still had, like, 12 locations.
And then Ian on set still wants to...
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. And we were realizing, as my producer Molly and I were doing this, like, oh, goodness gracious, we still have a dozen locations. And I don't know what it is about. I think Seattle's too lax. Portland is the laxest city I've ever been in. Like, it was the holidays, and we couldn't get anyone to commit. Like, just tell me no if I can't rent your restaurant for a shoot. It's okay. But we couldn't get anywhere. So, like, that into the shoot, and then 18 days was not enough. AJ, my DP, and I were always like, I don't think it ever affected what we got, but it was like we felt like we were throwing 80-yard bombs to ourselves and catching them. It was stupid.
I mean, if you didn't have the trained or like the experienced actors that you had, 18 days wouldn't have even been
100%.
Right.
But there's some freaky anomalies in that too. Of like Kaylee, who plays Sarah, Simon's antagonist, very experienced in theater, and this is basically her first film.
Right.
And as good as Patrick is, like when we were doing the second debate, which if you haven't seen it, is like it's the lengthy one where I wrote 7 pages of monolithic dialogue that was like no favor to them. Mm-hmm. And he was struggling and being wonderful and self-deprecating and not taking out anyone. And she was like, basically her first film. So it was this mix of new people like Kaylee and Deanna who were scary on the ball, and then more seasoned people. And yeah, having a good cast is like, I never thought of that, but it was like, oh, please save us time because we have too many locations and we're always hustling.
So how many of your locations were on Lady Farts? How many of your locations were places that you were related to the person that owned them, or?
A lot of them we asked. So it was funny because I had 2 answers, and I know Nancy also has an answer for your original question.
Absolutely.
But the first one was that we were extremely micro budget, very, very low budget. And so we were trying to figure out and be as creative as possible. all the office scenes. My dad sells plumbing, and they had a plumbing supply warehouse in California where we were shooting, and they were like, yeah, totally. So as long as we took the toilet seats out of the shot, we could use it.
Most of our doctor scenes took place in a BDSM dungeon. I just emailed them and I was like, hey, this is a really important film to us. I will make you cookies and bring them to the dungeon if you let us film there. And they did, and it was great. And then we were the like house that we were all in. It was the same Airbnb that we were all living in. So Valentina, who plays Paige, our main character, she was actually living in Paige's childhood bedroom the whole time. Our dryer broke, and so she was like air drying her clothes on C-stands in the Airbnb and everything. So yeah, it was a lot of just asking friends or asking BDSM dungeons. And Light Iron also was wonderful. This is the post house that Bonnie and Megan both work at in New York, Megan, our producer. They let us take their post facility and turn it into a coffee shop and a restaurant and a bar. We just squeezed as much we could out of every location.
I love that, like, you had such a wholesome, like, you were like, I'm gonna make cookies for a BDSM dungeon, and that's it. But like that's so on brand for the movie.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, also like while they were staying in the Airbnb, I had a family friend and I was staying in her she shed in the backyard with like a twin bed, and then we also shot at her house as well. So it was just everywhere you were, we were there.
But so, what was the answer for the toughest thing to take on while you're making?
Yeah, so other than it being micro budget and having to constantly run around and be creative, which also goes in part to what you had said as well, like we had so many amazing people working on this. Like I'm so fortunate to have been working with like Nancy and with Megan and with Val and Ola and Edith and all these wonderful people on our set who just were so talented and so good at their jobs that we could make it work no matter what. And but I think for me personally, the most challenging thing waking up is that it's a personal story. So every day you are going there and you're like, wow, this is my trauma. And the joke of the film is like your vagina becomes a family affair. And I'm like, well, my vagina is becoming a world affair out here. So I think it was kind of toeing a line of like mentally making sure like I'm in the right headspace when I like am talking to everyone and seeing things on set and like stepping out if I need to and kind of toeing a weird line there.
So how do you balance, like how, when you're on set, what part of you is going like, that's not the way it happened versus this is funnier that, like, you know, like how do you rectify those two emotions that you're probably having watching a scene play out that you've lived through?
It's weird. My mom did shave my legs while I sat on the sitz bath, so that was weird to watch. But it was like a beautiful thing at the same time. I think like it was like a healing thing. Like I said earlier, like you're crying, you're laughing, you don't know how to feel, but like I think that's like the beauty in it. And you know, there were times where I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go step out, gonna go sit outside while they're filming this one, or you know, just seeing how you're feeling that day.
I think that one of the things that I really was trying to work on through development and through production was talking to Bonnie and talking to Valentina and talking to myself in my head in the mirror a lot, because our film is based around this like big like physical kind of thing that she has to overcome with the surgery. And then after that, it's her kind of finding herself and going through things. And so it's not like we have this like big climactic spaceship scene or something at the end.
I also think
That's
been
0 for 2, just so if you're keeping track. 0 for 2 on the spaceships.
I would have liked it. Okay, so it makes sense.
So I was trying to figure out, okay, her vagina is healed, and now what is her emotional journey, and figuring that out. And I think carving that out was something important, because we have like this soft movie about everyone who loves each other and no one is really fighting that much. So what's the conflict here? And we kind of decided that it's Paige finding her agency, because in the beginning all of these men are telling her that she's crazy and won't be listening to her in her pain. Doctors aren't listening to her in her pain. She doesn't have much agency in her job. And so that's what we decided, was that it was her finding her agency through the film. And then the other thing was, this was my first time shooting any intimate scenes, and we had a lot of them. And it went from either medical stuff to masturbation scenes to sex scenes to traumatic sex scenes. And
I don't know if we're allowed to say that in Florida.
oh yes,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
We might be able to. I don't know. Like it could be.
We'll find out. We'll find out outside. And I think that was something that I was nervous to do coming in because I knew that it's so important to keep our actors safe. And so that's why I was really glad that we worked with our intimacy coordinator, Allison Bibikoff. And I didn't have to worry about the safety much at all when she was there. And she was like, I got it. I'm going to make sure that they're safe. And you worry about the art. And she was amazing. So I would do that 100% every time. And now I've shot a bunch of intimate scenes. Let's go, guys.
So for you keeping score, Charles, we're 0 for 2 on the spaceships, but we're 2 for 2 on films with masturbation. Down on this end. But I also want to just second the intimacy coordinator. I just write stuff that I'm interested in, and then I'm like, oh, I have to, this is a sex scene and it's day 2, and we have a masturbation scene, and our intimacy coordinator made it, I can be kind of, the pragmatic person of kept us moving, but more than that, it was like the safety that you were saying of like, it's a totally different wavelength of conversations between actors who have only had dinner once and have to act like they've been married forever. And I know there's like a debate about intimacy coordinators. I'm like, why is there a debate? Like, how is that not a gain for everybody on set?
How did you find an intimacy coordinator to work with that you were comfortable with that had the same vision as you, or was that not even a part of the conversation? Like,
So it was always part of the conversation because I think me and Nancy and really everybody on set agreed that it has to be safe. We have to have this. This is non-negotiable. And it was just ironic, like I said, like fate. An intimacy coordinator had reached out. She saw our Instagram. She saw some of our posts, and she's like, hey, I saw you guys are filming. I'm an intimacy coordinator. It sounds like something you might need. We hopped on a Zoom, and we all instantly clicked right away. And yeah, she was, I'll second Nancy, she was amazing. Like, having her there was such an asset. And yeah, it made those scenes so amazing to work on and be there for.
And one thing that she says a lot is that she's not the sex police. She's not there to be like, you can't do that. She's there to figure out the boundaries. But she also made the scenes better, too. Because we could be like, hey, what position do you think they should be in for this and stuff? And we would all be talking, like, artistically. And when Paige, like, gains agency, we're like, Paige is on top. And she's like, yeah, she is on top. And, like, we were talking about all those things. And it's great to, like, talk creatively about sex on screen.
Again, I don't know if that position's approved for Florida.
They did missionary, and that is it. Loving missionary.
Make that clear that the Florida Film Festival does not endorse that position. Ian, how did you find your intimacy coordinator?
Producer Molly. So I am in Seattle, and Molly and I met on my third short. She was a makeup artist, and I saw something that was producer-esque. She's down in Portland, and so by that time it was a lot of defer and trusting. Like I was also producing, but running around location scouting, as we talked about. And she found Kristen, who was fantastic. Kristen was in Showgirls and has like a very colorful history of like, she would say her own sex scenes, some that she's not ashamed of, and others that were the kind of things we read about, during Me Too. And she's parlayed all of that into like, how can I make people not have, she still has a love of what she did, but kind of extracting the garbage. And yeah, I think it was day 2, and again, things I wouldn't have thought about, but that an AD hands you a schedule, and I'm like, I guess we're going. So there's just all these things that people don't think about when they read the IndieWire headline of pro or con intimacy. There's a lot. Like, safety is not just a therapist word. You can there is an efficiency thing, because when people you get all this weird potential stuff out of the way so that you're free. I mean, you were saying it really well. You're just free to have the conversations that you either won't get to or would take 6 hours to get to, because it's like you're helping everyone feel, I don't know. I think you're tracking with me, but yeah, it was really.
It sounds like just another tool to help build trust with
100%.
actors, so that it's kind of like it's almost a shorthand for the director, so you could just take that piece of your brain and devote it back to the scene.
And at least for us, Kristen was there blocking, so suggesting things, and I could be like, I don't know, all of a sudden this feels stilted. Like, it just, safe is the word. It just became very like, none of us are too buttoned up about anything. And nobody's feeling like they can't speak up. So, it was just not the thing that you read in the headlines of fraught or something. You know what I mean? It was just like, everybody feels better, and we're comfortable in a thing that, it's weird. When I think back on it, I'm like, that was so comfortable. And like, my wife was watching it and cringing. It's an uncomfortable scene. And I was like, it's not weird for me to watch. It was just one of the better collaborative moments. Because it was just
it all
really.
depends on how you say that, though. If you're like, it's not weird for me to watch.
Yeah, it's the tone of how I say it.
That's a wildly different conversation.
Yeah, totally.
So the young man over there with the hat and the microphone, if anybody has any questions, raise your hand. Hey, we have a question already.
Hi, my name is Kendra. I'm a student at Full Sail. I just had a question. I think you mentioned that it took 12 years for you to create the film. My question is for all the other filmmakers, how long did it take for you to complete your project?
For the Donn of Tiki, it was almost 4 years from concept and development to finishing it.
They were like, during COVID, they were like, we need something to do, and now they're here.
Wrote it from about 2017, 2019. A bunch of life happened, which we all lived through collectively. After that, it was on the shelf, and then I think I picked it up, and it was about 2 years. So it sounds like about 4 years with a big 3-year gap in the middle.
I got the actual surgery, the story's based off in 2016, and started writing it after that. Kind of started as a TV pilot, shifted into a feature film, and then we shot in the summer of 2022. So the writing, it's now been like an 8-year journey for the writing, but like for production, it's been about a 3-year journey.
I just want to add that although it took 12 years, I was making other films. It wasn't full-time. I like to use the analogy of a cook has a stock pot that's always in the back of the stove that you're adding to and stirring. It's kind of like that. And so there would be times where we'd work on it for months, and then there'd be months where we just couldn't do it. And my cinematographer, Vicente Franco, calls it the cup of gas method. You raise enough money to put a cup of gas in the car, you drive it till the car runs out of gas, then you go get another job.
That's all of documentary filmmaking. Does anybody else have any questions?
Hi, I'm Ayana. My question is for Bonnie and Nancy. When it comes to writing such a personal, intimate story, how do you become comfortable letting someone else basically tell it for you and also feel like you have the space and opportunity to tell it yourself?
Just to add on to that, did Nancy, were you aware of this medical situation before? Or?
Yeah, I actually have vaginismus myself, and so that's kind of how we got together, is that we were on a Zoom and we were talking to each other, and we're like, we're both filmmakers, and we both have broken lady parts. Incredible. And so the first scene in the movie is her when she's, I think, 12 years old, trying to put a tampon in. And I immediately emailed Bonnie before I read the rest of the script, and I was like, I've gone through exactly this. I want to do this so much. This is spot on. So yeah, Bonnie, if you want to talk about letting me direct.
Fine. No, but Nancy hit the nail on the head. When it came to this story, especially the directing of it, it needed to be somebody that understood it, because we did have so many intimate scenes. We did have so much stuff that's happening. And like Nancy said, she was contacting me already about the tampon. I was like, oh, she knows, she gets it. She's gonna get this, because it's a hard thing to explain to someone that maybe hasn't experienced it and gone through that. And I think that was the beauty of this project was safe. The set was a safe space and comfortable, and everybody on there really, really tried to keep it authentic, tried to keep it real. And I think the beautiful part about Nancy is she was so dedicated to making sure the story was told from such an authentic and raw and female perspective. And I think it's beautiful. And it's always hard when you're like, this is my story and someone's doing it, oh my God. And there was never once I felt uncomfortable about it because everybody that was working on it was amazing and talented and wonderful at their jobs.
How do you cast yourself? Like,
so actually, I was working as a bartender during the pandemic when I was writing a lot, like kind of editing and finishing the script. So that part came natural.
Awesome. Does anybody else in the audience have questions? I also have more questions, so don't feel pressured if you don't.
Hi, so I was wondering what your creative process looks like. Like, whoever wants to answer, like, what does your creative process look like, and how do you get into like that right mindset to deliver what you want to deliver?
Therapy is, I think, the short answer. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, so I can say for Alex and I, we do a lot of work together. We've known each other for about 20 years and have worked on a lot of projects together. And it kind of starts as these long phone calls where, you know, I'll be like doing dishes and Alex will be working on something at his house and we're on the phone for like 3 hours. And as we talk about a project, it just sort of marinates and these little things sort of float to the top where we're like, oh, okay, that's good. Let's hold on to that. But it's a lot of back and forth and just kind of, in our case at least, just trusting the other person. So when one of us says, I don't like it, I don't think it's going to work, that's a big, we listen to that.
Do you shoot to an outline? Or
We did on this, yeah.
you'd almost have to.
Yeah. I think that to add on to what Max is saying, there's a lot of sort of give and take with ideas. One thing that we did that I was a little bit worried about in this film was the animation, because the animation, I just threw out the idea one day, like, oh, the animation should progress styles as we go through Donn's life. We'll never be able to afford that. And I kind of just threw it out. And then every time we would talk on the phone, Max was like, we got to get animation like that. Like, we have to do that. And then we talked to animators like, you can't do that. So it became this thing where he was championing my idea that I had already given up on.
You said that you got laughed out of rooms when you were in Los Angeles.
No LA animators would do it. They all thought we were crazy.
Yeah, I mean, most people probably already know, but animation is extremely labor-intensive and time-consuming, and therefore very expensive. And specifically, the stuff we wanted to do in our film, where a lot of it is this hand-drawn style, which is really technical and challenging and takes forever. And eventually, we found a company, Venturia Animation, based in Bogota, Colombia, who wanted to take it on, and cost of living in Bogota is less than Los Angeles, so they were able to make it work for our budget.
That's awesome.
So for me, it's a collaborative process always. So my cinematographer and my field producer and I work really closely together on the story. And when we're in the field, we're all absorbing what's happening and talking it through at all times. And they're really proficient filmmakers themselves. My cinematographer is a multiple Academy Award nominated filmmaker, and the journalists are, well respected in their field. And then in the edit process, it's similar as I described earlier, working with my writer and my editor, pardon me, and they're all filmmakers themselves. So I really have a very open process that way, because I think documentary filmmaking of the sort that I make, which is not scripted, is a team sport. And I've learned the hard way when I've done it by myself, it doesn't work as well.
So was it kind of verite where you would be just shooting, and then when you got back to the editing room, you'd be like, okay, well, the scene is this, that, or the other thing?
Yeah, exactly. I was, we were talking on the ride over here, and I was describing how, because of a lack of funding, we would go and film, we would come back, we would view the footage, we would log the footage, we would edit a new sample to raise more money, and then, right? So it really wasn't until 2 years ago, and we got a grant from the Ford Foundation, which was unbelievable, and the executive was a former filmmaker. I mean, he still is a filmmaker, but he's the head of Just Films at Ford, and he said, I know exactly where you guys are. If you want to go away for the next year, because we didn't have to report back technically on the grant for 1 year. We trust you emphatically. We know you're going to make a great film. Do what you need to do. I mean, what a gift. What a vote of confidence, right? And so we just went and said, and I praise him to this day as I am right now. Chi Hui Wang is his name, and he's remarkable. So what a gift. And, and another collaborator, right? We shared the film, and he gave us probably 5 notes, but they were all like pitch perfect notes, right?
I don't know if you guys have clocked, but we're 4 for 4 in movies talking about money. So that's just a kind of a preview of your life. Whatever creative decisions you're going to make, the monetary decisions also.
I know I can definitely second that. It is a team effort, it is a collaborative effort. And especially when you're working on these micro budget type of things are not going to work out. Something is going to go wrong. The whole, whatever it is not going to follow through, but you have to just lean into it and trust.
I feel like Nancy just had a good story. She looked like she had like a panic attack / giggle moment.
You were talking about things going wrong, and I was just thinking about when we were at the dungeon and that 12-year-old rapper was recording next door really loudly and wouldn't stop. And we're like, do you think we could work something out? Like, you do some stuff, and then we record, and I didn't know who it was. And then he turns around, and it's this 12-year-old boy, and he just goes, "We're conducting business here." And I was like, okay. Continue, Bonnie. Sorry.
No. That was literally it. That
Couldn't
right
you
there.
send someone over? Couldn't you send someone over with a whip? Discipline.
You did have weapons around you, is I think what he's saying.
Yes, we got creative. I'll put it that way. There was some noises that were made, but I think at the end of the day, it's just like leaning into it and being like, okay, well, maybe that's there, but what else can we do to pivot really quickly, and where else can we go, and what else can we do?
So in writing it, did you start with, here are the like the tentpole things that happened to me that I definitely want to be sure that's in this movie, or was it, here's a general idea of things, and then as I'm writing it, that time that my mom shaved my leg should be in the movie?
Actually, it started as the scene where they're in the doctor's office and they're learning about the diagnosis, and the parents are there, and he's like, I want to thank the parents for being here and being supportive. And that was actually the first scene I wrote. And then it kind of spiraled from there, where I was like, okay, wait, what is the story here? Because that moment in my personal life was sticking out so much. I was like, I need to write about this. And as I was writing that scene, the characters were kind of coming out. And then that's when I backtracked and was like, tent poles, character outlines, bio, all that kind of stuff.
Ian, what about you?
Can you remind me of the question?
What's your process?
Oh, process.
Yeah.
The only thing I thought of is when I'm writing, I listen to ambient electronic music. Actually, and that's a really 2-for-1 good question to the tone thing, or how you don't fall into X or Y. The trailer that they showed up here is by Andrew Bell, that music that played. I was listening to that song while I was writing it. And this is a weird thing that I don't know if it's me or other writers, but I either find music or music finds me right as I'm writing the next thing. Yeah. And as cheesy as this sounds, I'm still going to say it. It like kind of speaks to me about like, if your tone is this, that means yes to this and no to that. So I couldn't write if there were vocals. I love music with vocals, but like there's no way I'm putting a sentence down and hearing somebody like singing at me. But like I listen to ambient electronic music, and I happen to like that, genre. So it's weird. That helps me write.
Are you writing linearly? Like the first scene is them on the bench, and then the last scene is them in the house with the confrontation?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, my storytelling mentor is Brian McDonald. I highly recommend the book Invisible Ink. Most of these books by Robert McKee or whatever are like, they're too complicated for me. I'm like, I don't know what 6 acts is in a story. That's crazy. Invisible Ink, he teaches at Pixar and Sony and blah, blah, blah. And it's very thin and simple, but old school. And so I find it helpful. Person with ADHD, like if the desk gets cluttered or the writing process, like I'm in big trouble. So it helps me to like, I can't imagine starting on scene 12. It's like, I'll make notes and stuff and sort those, but yeah, I definitely need to write A to Z.
Interesting.
Do you have your next projects picked out, and will they be anything like these, like the ones you just finished?
I'm going to guess Will is already working on 3 or 4 other movies.
I just finished 2 short films about other environmental activists, but my next project if anybody has any funding, please step forward. I want to make a film about the spirit of Brazilian music. I don't speak Portuguese, but the music absolutely moves my soul. And the way that I want to tell that story is by going and spending a couple of months in Brazil, finding the right musician or group of musicians, and just filming the creative process. And in Brazil, the music is everywhere. It's permeating the culture. So that would mean watching that person playing in the streets, seeing them in the recording studio, seeing them playing gigs, whatever. Not a lot of description, just a lot of seeing. And, you know, the musicians will be telling their story by doing what they're doing and, you know, talking about the music process with each other. But not an easy film to fund. Maybe I should make something in my own backyard about people who knit or something. It doesn't have to take another 14, 15 years.
I mean, if they knit and also play Brazilian music, I think you're onto something.
Oh, that would be good.
Right?
We have a couple of ideas that we've been kicking around, and we've started some preliminary work on a new documentary project. But the next project will probably depend on what happens with this film and how long we're involved in this process of taking it around. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Max and I both come from narrative. This is our first foray into documentary, so we would love to do a narrative thing as our next thing, but need a lot more money up front to do that. And we've been talking to a lot of people about future documentary ideas, so we'll see what happens.
Money again. So AJ and I he's my DP, we got really close on The Way We Speak, and I wrote what I want to make next, and I want to shoot it in Northern Canada. On location, it would be very different than The Way We Speak, but still my style of film, which is like topical and has a POV, whether it's a good one or not. But AJ's like, oh, cool, on location, all practical, no VFX, we need $5 million. So we're like,
piece of cake.
Yeah, like in May, we're going to try to like,
Is that Canadian dollars or American
well, I was
dollars?
just going to say, you know, we don't know much, but we know, there are tax incentives, you know, which
For
we
sure.
benefited from by shooting in Oregon. They're much more robust in Canada because Canada cares about the arts. And then our dollar to theirs. So we think we would get 30 to 40% back, but you know, all the granularity of SAG and stuff, there's security deposits and percentages that you have to put down, and they don't care how much you're getting. It's just really expensive, even if you'll need to borrow the money even if it's going back. So we're just gonna like, you know, my first film was in Arabic language, and like you were saying about not speaking Portuguese, the ignorance I think is really helpful. It's like I have no idea how to, you know, raise $5 million, so let's go try, you know, and like I'll send better emails because I'm not in my head about I'll never do that again. Like I have no idea, so we're just gonna try to be smart and considerate and like figure it out.
And that's part of filmmaking, don't you think? You have to suspend your disbelief every
Right.
time. Because
Yeah.
if you went in knowing how difficult it was going to be,
Right.
you'd have to have your head examined to do
And
it.
if you're an expert, then you can talk yourself out of anything from doing it again. It's like,
Exactly.
and now we'll just go make fools of ourselves, and someday it'll exist.
It is very much like having a child. Like when you forget how much the first 6 months sucked, then you're willing to have another one.
Yeah. It's living in full delusion every day, and I love it. But yeah, again, if anyone has money, step forward. We would love to take Lady Parts to the next level. I think that's like our main focus right now. I know for myself, I'm really passionate about telling vaginal healthcare stories, female perspective stories, and for me, I'd love something that I also struggle with is chronic yeast infections, and I feel like there's a fun story there that also needs to be told, and no one's talking about. So that's kind of next on my radar.
I'm in development with a movie right now that is about this young lesbian finding her way in the fetish community. So yeah, kind of similar to Lady Parts.
I'm curious to see like your wholesome approach to that. Like,
Oh,
I don't-
you'll see it. Don't worry.
Hi, for Will sorry, I can read from him, Parrinello. I don't have the funds, but I do have Portuguese because I am Brazilian. So I'm just glad that you have this project about Brazilian music, and I do think everybody should know it. It's a very rich culture, and I think you're gonna have a good time if you can do the project. But so if you ever need Portuguese translation, I'm available.
Thank
I'm
you very
Carla.
much. Yeah, we're taking the film to Portugal. We're taking the film to Brazil in July. There's 2 festivals that will screen it like back to back, one in Sao Paulo and then one in Rio. So that will be the beginning of the kind of research.
When do we do the Taylor Swift listening party for?
Tonight.
Was there another question up there that I saw? Oh, there you go.
How you doing? My name is Ronald. For Will, I know, how do you remain cinematic and spread awareness at the same time? That's a good question.
It's a good question, yeah. How do you remain cinematic and spread awareness? I mean, inevitably, you are a visual storyteller, right? And so you're constantly looking for what is the most interesting thing to you visually and emotionally, right? And sometimes those things go together and sometimes they don't, right? So, the director of photography will say, why are we shooting this scene at high noon today? Well, it's because when it's when it's happening, right? You wouldn't choose to do that if you're making a feature. So I think it's you're constantly left brain, right brain, and it's staying honest. And I'm kind of retreading the same territory. But when we screened the film a year ago, and the audience said, "Too much information. You know too much. We're going to have to kill you," kind of a thing, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Do something different. You just kind of get in. You have to be really honest with yourself at all times as a storyteller, and understand that you're making a film, and understand that the audience needs to be feeling emotion, and they have to understand the passion of the subjects of your film, and that comes through in your storytelling if you stay true to that and you keep your eyes open to that. And I think it's important to work with a creative team who has that vision. So, my cinematographer is incredibly talented, and he understands the importance of light and framing, and he's patient. He sits and waits, and he gets the moment. So, if you have a follow-up question, because I want to make sure I've actually answered your question.
Yeah. And in that 12-year process, right, and all the footage that you got, how do you decide whose story you're going to tell?
Well, we had our 3 protagonists, right? That was no doubt. But as I had mentioned earlier when we were talking to Charles, that we knew we had to get the families in there because our protagonists were a little bit too stoic, and they live in this dangerous situation, and they don't see it as being dangerous, right? I mean, they do a pretty good job of protecting themselves. But Berta Cáceres was assassinated. She was the one we never thought would get killed because she was so savvy, so smart, so ahead. But guess what? This corporation that wanted to put a hydroelectric dam in hired people in the community to be spies. So, you stay true. The material tells you who to follow, right? We have a saying, the footage never lies in documentary. If it's unscripted, you have to follow the material. And when you don't have what you need, or when you realize that one of your characters isn't as strong as another, then that's when you have to go back and find another in the field. And that's when we started bringing the families in. It's not that the characters weren't strong enough, but we needed to get through to the heart. And these hardcore activists, these people who are fighting against this oppressive governments and corporations, just it's hard for them to see the risk that they face. So someone else had to help us tell that story.
Will's being humble because there's a difference between like the journalist putting their perspective on the story and what he does in the movie. And that is that like the story unfolds for the audience, and I'm sure as you were shooting it, it was unfolding in front of your eyes. Yeah. But that's, I think, the thing that is sort of the most interesting perspective is that, like, you allow us to kind of be there as it's happening, as opposed to saying the power plant, like the people that are trying to build the power plant are going to assassinate this person in the way that you would in like a traditional news story. where in your filmmaking process do you start to pick that up, or is that something that you innately just know to do?
I mean, sometimes you innately know to do it, and sometimes you don't. I mean, the scene, there's a scene in the film where we were with Berta filming in the community that she's protecting. It's a remote place, and we had to get out before dark because it's a place that we were having to drive back to the city from this very remote location in the mountains. You have to get out before dark. And there had been threats against her life while we were there. And we heard, she told us about this. She was getting calls throughout the night. We were all sleeping together in a small, one-room house of someone in the community. And so there were like 7 of us sleeping with this 4 people in a family. And we were filming, and we weren't really aware, but my cinematographer, another tip for shooting documentaries, cinematographers should be wearing headphones and listening to the sound that's being recorded. And he captured a moment where Berta Cáceres is talking to one of her main allies, a woman who's a journalist and a poet, and describing the phone call that she got threatening her life. And it's such an incredible moment because Berta is so strong and she doesn't want to show weakness, and you see fear in her eyes for the first time. But we didn't know that we had that footage until we got in the edit room, because the cinematographer, even though he captured it and he knew what had happened, it didn't really click, because we then went on, as we were driving out over the mountain that day, there was an entire community that blocked the road and was threatening to kill her. And we had to get through this incredible roadblock and this traumatic scene. So that's what we remembered. That's what he remembered. So having those two things together. So it's really spending hours in the edit room and again, just being really honest. And the footage doesn't lie, right? The story tells you what's powerful.
Interestingly, Donn of Tiki also has threats on Don the Beachcomber's life in it. It's played differently in the movie, but there's some organized crime elements that are pretty interesting. Did Trader Vic make any threats on your lives while you were making the movie, or no?
No, but there. No, Trader Vic did not threaten to kill us. But yeah, the mob does play a role in the film, and that was actually very challenging because the mob does not keep great records. That's not entirely true. They keep fantastic records of their legitimate businesses, but the behind-the-scenes stuff is a little bit harder to verify. And so that was one of the things we dealt with. It was also a legal issue at some point. Our lawyers were like, okay, who are these guys that we're talking about? Are they alive? What family do they have left? Show us anything you have to back this stuff up.
Did the daughter that is the daughter of that woman, did she comment at all on the divorce and what happened with that? Or because that's not in the movie, is it?
We don't have her talking about that in the film. So Don and his first wife, they got an annulment after years of marriage.
Don goes to jail, and a woman goes to get him out of jail in exchange for half of his business. And the woman winds up being like mob related, and it's exactly what you think would happen next happens next. But it's hilarious and completely appropriate, and also in reality was probably completely terrifying.
Probably, yeah. And there's this mob connection that we definitely do explore. And Karen Sund, who's the woman in the film that you're talking about, it was her mom, Sunny, who was married to Don, and within a couple of years, Don the Beachcomber, the corporation, Don had no part of it whatsoever. It was owned by Sunny and half owned by these two mobsters, the guys who ran the Shapery in Chicago.
Yeah. And Karen was very young when all this happened, so she kind of just, I mean, that is the moment in the movie, in her interview, where she's like, I have the annulment papers, and she like hands them to me. And she's confused by them because she's like, they were married for like 6 years. How do you get an annulment after 6 years? It's like, well, the mob is involved. You know, you can get Don to sign anything, kind of.
He doesn't show up for the proceedings, which then gives her all of the business. So the theory is that he was maybe threatened or afraid to show up.
Yeah, that's the working theory. Yeah. We didn't actually ask the mob.
Hypothetically. So we only have time for a couple more questions. If anybody has anything that they'd like to ask, now's the time.
Hi, my name is Mason. This question's for Nancy and Bonnie. So, like, when you're creating like a sex type story, how do you go about like promoting things like that? Because I feel like it's like a subject that like not talked about, so there's no market for it. So like, how do you go about promoting it?
Our wonderful man who has been helping with our marketing is right there in the audience. Jack, he's amazing. Yes, exactly. I think that we've had a lot of fun with the marketing because it is, a sex, it's around sex and different things with that. And so one of the things that we did was we put stickers on condoms. We raffled off vibrators and things. And we have just kind of leaned into it. We decided that we're not going to shy away from our subject matter. We're going to really lean into it and go to spaces where they're educating women or educating young people about sex, things like that.
And yet you're still in Florida somehow.
I know this is our first one, so we're doing a pretty good dry run here in Florida. So,
also, we've been really lucky to partner with like some brands that are also very sex positive, like Intimate Rose. Their dilators are featured in our movie. The Pelvic People, they're the Kiwi vibrators you've been seeing raffled off. They're specifically designed also to help people with pelvic floor dysfunction. We partnered with Hello Gina. They do digital online therapy for vaginismus, so you can do it from the comfort of your own home with dilators. So in doing that, we also have found so many communities of people, and Tight-Lipped, another one too. And we found a lot of communities of people. I know it's a great name.
The names are fantastic.
It's a great name. We've kind of found these communities of people that were so excited to finally have a platform, too, to say, hey, I have this issue or something related to this issue, and I haven't been able to talk about it with someone, and I'm so excited for this film. And that community has also been supporting us and sharing us, and it's been a wonderful community to be a part of.
Just to follow up on that briefly, when you get that kind of like community feedback, does it take some of the pressure of the movie's like artistic success? I don't even know if that's the right way to put it, but knowing that you've already made that impact, does it help you with screening the movie, feeling more comfortable, those kinds of things?
I know for me, personally, it does. I was really nervous because there's a message behind this film, and I don't want it to come across as the wrong message. And I don't want someone who is experiencing this to see it and feel like maybe this wasn't the authentic experience. And it does put a lot of pressure. But I think the most beautiful part is, we had in the audience a pelvic floor therapist on Wednesday, and she was saying, this story is a lot of her patients' stories, and she wishes they could all come see it now. I had met someone from a vulvodynia awareness group in Facebook that we're both in the crowd yesterday. So I think, just knowing that we already made a difference is so powerful and incredible, and helps me through the process, but I'll let Nancy say for her too.
Yeah, I think that we've got such wonderful feedback, not only from people who suffer from vaginismus or vulvodynia, but we had like a dad come up to us being like, man, maybe I should consider this. Like, I might have to talk about this with my daughter someday.
That was me.
I know. I didn't want to call you out.
At the opening night party, that was me. I'll say.
And I think that was wonderful. That was great to hear because it's true. It's not just a film for women. It is for women, but it's for everyone. And you probably know someone who has lady parts. So we want you to be able to be supportive of them and things like that. And beyond just the message and meaning of the film, people came up to us and said, I learned a lot, but most of all, it was really entertaining too, which I think was wonderful, is that it's not just, we love documentaries, but it's not a documentary. It's a comedy. So we're happy that you're able to learn and also laugh along with it.
That was what I said when I first met you guys. The thing that I think is one of the best compliments is the movie in no way is directed at me, and yet it's so funny and so engaging that absolutely, I enjoyed it and saw perspectives outside of myself, which is awesome.
Yeah. Just to add on, I agree. I think that was a huge thing we had all talked about, was making sure that we don't want to come at you and give you a 90-minute lecture about vulvovaginal and pelvic pain because no one wants that. We wanted to show you what it's actually like to live with it in a normal person's life that everyone can find something they can relate to.
I think, do we have one more question before you?
Actually, I was wondering, and it kind of came up when Max mentioned that they consulted with their lawyer, which kind of surprised me. But Will, this is directed to you. Did you run into any kind of formal legal interference in your film, whether in the form of law enforcement or governmental entities or anything of that nature?
Before I forget and my ADHD takes over, Will has a screening in an hour and a half at the Enzian. So if you're interested in the movie or things that he said, you should go to that.
Please come see the film. Yeah, when we were in Honduras in 2017 filming, 8 men had been accused of conspiring to assassinate Berta Cáceres. So we were there to film some of the trial and to film the family going through that and in the community. And at the same time, we were trying to find people from the opposition to talk to us. So people from that company specifically, as well as politicians. And we had a really difficult time getting the opposition to talk to us in any of our 3 countries, right? Because they see us as being biased, and we're going to only set them up to be the bad guys, and we're not going to give them a fair shake. But I had been referred to a man who was a crisis attorney. That was his. That was the name of his gig. He's based in Toronto, and I called him and I spoke on the phone with him, and I asked him one question. Over 20 minutes, he went on this tirade against Berta, and he was talking about her like she was this horrible human being, and he was, he went on and on. I was kind of flabbergasted about that, and I thought he was in Honduras, but he wasn't. And he was going to be in D.C. the next day. So I had to call home and have my folks decide who in the team can go to D.C. because we have to interview him tomorrow. They're like, why? I said, because we can't get the opposition, and this guy is a crackpot, and he's willing to go on camera and say all this horrible stuff. So to answer your question, like within 48 hours, we received a threatening letter, not from his law firm, but from another one, representing the family that has the corporation that was building the hydroelectric plant, basically saying, we understand that you're going to impugn our names, and we hereby put you on notice that when this film comes out, you may be brought to the legal system. And so you have to save all your communications, all the footage, all the hard drive. Like they were laying this legal groundwork for us to look ahead. And they CC'd all of our funders and all of the key people associated with the film. So I called my attorney, and he said, well, that's interesting. Were you thinking about even putting the family? It's like they're the wealthiest family in Latin America. Were you thinking about putting them in the film? And I said, no, quite honestly, because they seem a bit too distant. He said, well, simply write back. We had no intention of including you in the film, but now that you've reached out, if you would like to be included, we would love to do an interview with you. The end. And we never heard back from them again, and they actually never sent letters to all those people who they CC'd, right? But when the film gets broad distribution, we're not so sure that we might not hear from them, right? So anyway, yeah, like that.
So we're almost out of time, but I have a couple of weird lightning round questions. If you guys don't mind, can I ask them?
Yeah.
Okay. So Nancy, a bird pooped on a camera lens on a shoot?
Oh, yeah. That was on our first film that some of us made in undergrad called Married on a Monday. And we were filming outside, and the bird pooped straight on the lens. So our DP and AC had to wipe that off right quick.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
That's
well,
kind of amazing.
that's filming in Michigan, rural Michigan.
Ian, is the writer's kind of egotism, is that like a defense mechanism for his wife dying, or is he purposely being obtuse so that he doesn't have to deal with the reality of his wife's situation, or is that not? Am I reading too far into it?
No, but I think it's worse than that. So I think when they're on the couch and she says loss is trauma, you got to let it go, and he doesn't. I mean, at least part of the idea was that he's kind of a trapped kid, and that he sees a moment, and the more he sees or feels resistance to what for him feels like a late breaking moment, he has to push that away, which means wife, which means best friend. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for Donn of Tiki, how do you know that putting something like having 56 different glasses in the movie is going to play with the audience?
Well, a lot of the folks who are interested in the subject matter are big tiki people. So they go to tiki bars, they have tiki stuff in their homes, mugs and glassware, and we thought they would like that. And hopefully it's visually interesting enough for people who are not especially interested in the subject.
Yeah, I think that spot specifically, the idea was to like flash frame all these different glasses, just to show how complicated this was for these bartenders that were working on Don's drinks, and how, you know.
No, it plays. It definitely plays. It's like on paper, though, I wouldn't think like showing 56 different glasses. Like, you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. I don't think we would have done it, except that in Tim, who's talking there, in his archives, he had photos from the Maikai, which is in Florida, of all of their glassware, and it was all measured, and it was like, this glass looks like this, and these are the only drinks you can make in this glass. And I was like, oh, we could just, he has like 1,000 of these, we could just flash through them really quick and show how insane it is.
And that's awesome. It's like such a bold choice, but it plays well. And then last for Will, when you're in a situation that is like a threat to your life, is your camera and that you're making a movie, is that like a lightning rod or a shield? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, back to the story of, Berta was threatened. We had to go through this community. There was a roadblock. So our field producer had set up a situation whereby when we pulled up to this roadblock, he said, I'm going to get out of the car, and if you guys be ready to shoot. We had GoPros mounted on both cameras that were rolling. You guys are ready to start shooting, and if I unlock the doors, that means get out and start filming. So we got to the roadblock. He sensed that there was danger there, and he unlocked the doors, and we got out. And as he said, a couple of gringos with big noses and big cameras end up scaring away the authorities, and the National Police backed off. So, yeah, I think the camera generally helps. And as it turns out, the men who were inevitably convicted of conspiring to kill her, all of these telephone records and text and emails showed that they had spies in the community, as I mentioned before. And they mentioned that these gringos were there making a film, and that they needed to make sure that the National Police did not let trouble happen at that roadblock. And we could have put it in the film, but it was one of those too much information. It took so long to explain it, and it was a sidebar.
So unfortunately, we're out of time. But if you have any more questions, except for Will, who has to go to a screening, and you should go to that if you're interested in his movie, I will be around for a couple minutes. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you for coming to the festival. Thank you, Filmmakers, for being here and letting me guide you with questions. I've seriously enjoyed our time together.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And see Will's movie. It's excellent.